He flicked the jet keycard straight at Marcus's chest without slowing his stride, the plastic edge tapping against his coveralls before dropping to the concrete between them. The sound was small, but it carried in the hangar, a sharp click that pulled a few heads up and then quickly back down again. Ethan Caldwell kept walking, already lifting his phone to his ear, his reflection sliding across the polished fuselage like Marcus was never there. "Fuel it. We are late," he said, not breaking pace. Marcus looked at the card on the floor for a fraction longer than necessary, his hand hovering midair before he bent to pick it up. The concrete was cool through the thin sole of his boot, the smell of jet fuel hanging low and metallic. A nearby ground tech shifted his weight, pretending to check a clipboard that had not moved in minutes. Marcus straightened, thumb brushing a thin line of grease across the edge of the card, then turned toward the aircraft without a word. His steps were steady, measured, but a half-beat slower than before. Behind him, the hangar door hummed open another inch, letting in a slice of white morning light that cut across the floor, stopping just short of where he stood. Marcus slid the keycard into his pocket and moved along the left wing, his shoulder passing close to the cool metal skin of the jet, the reflection stretching and compressing with each step. The hangar had not returned to its usual rhythm yet. Conversations that had paused did not fully resume, only softened into low, careful murmurs that stayed out of reach. A rolling tool cart squeaked somewhere behind him, then stopped as if the person pushing it reconsidered the noise. Marcus reached the fuel panel and paused just long enough to wipe his hands on a folded rag tucked at his belt, though there was barely any grease to clear. The motion was slower than it needed to be, deliberate, a reset more than a necessity. He opened the panel and leaned in, the faint smell of fuel sharper here, metallic and dry against the back of his throat. The gauge needle trembled, barely perceptible, a thin vibration that could pass for normal if no one lingered on it. His eyes stayed on it a second, longer than routine, then shifted to the coupling beneath, tracing the line without touching it. Footsteps approached and stopped just outside his peripheral vision. Raymond Pike stood there with his hands on his hips, not looking at the panel, only at Marcus. "We are not chasing ghosts today," he said, voice even, already moving on before Marcus answered. Marcus gave a small nod that Raymond did not wait to see. The latch clicked softly as Marcus closed the panel, the sound swallowed by the open space. Across the hangar, Ethan's voice carried in short, clipped phrases, pacing tight and efficient, every step aligned with purpose. No one interrupted him. No one needed to. Marcus adjusted the hose connection, tightening it a fraction more than standard, then checked it again with a brief press of his thumb. His movements settled into a steady cadence, each action precise, spaced evenly, as if he was measuring something invisible between them. A mechanic 2 bays over glanced up, held the look for half a second, then dropped his gaze back to a clipboard that had not changed pages. Marcus straightened, rolling his shoulders once, small and contained, before reaching for the next step in the checklist. When he spoke into his headset to confirm fuel status, his voice came out level, unhurried, as if nothing had shifted at all. The reply crackled back after a slight delay, a fraction longer than usual, then cleared its throat into routine. Marcus listened, eyes flicking once toward the closed cabin door, then back to the line in front of him, and continued. Marcus moved along the fuselage toward the nose, the checklist tablet balanced in one hand, his thumb hovering just above the next item without pressing it yet. The delay was small, almost invisible, but it lingered long enough to pull his attention back to it. Behind him, the hangar had settled into a quieter version of itself, not silent, just measured, as if every sound had been turned down a notch. A wrench tapped once against metal, then did not tap again. Someone cleared their throat and shifted position, boots scraping lightly across the concrete before going still. Marcus stepped onto the low ladder near the cockpit, his weight testing the first rung a fraction slower than usual before committing. Inside, Lena Brooks sat in the right seat, headset resting around her neck, scanning a tablet. She glanced up when his shadow crossed the doorway, her eyes holding on him for a beat longer than necessary before she gave a short nod. "We good?" she asked, not looking away this time. Marcus did not answer immediately. His gaze moved past her shoulder to the instrument panel, then back to her, then briefly to the narrow strip of sky visible through the windshield. Fuel is within range, he said, the words even, but spaced slightly apart. Lena watched him for a second, as if weighing the phrasing, then nodded once and turned back to her screen. The cockpit door remained open, and through it Ethan's voice drifted in from the cabin, steady and uninterrupted, threading through a call that did not slow for anything happening outside. Marcus stepped back down, one hand sliding along the rail, his grip tightening for a brief moment before releasing. On the ground, he circled toward the right engine, his path cutting across a thin band of sunlight that had crept farther into the hangar. Dust hung in it, suspended, unmoving. A younger mechanic nearby shifted his stance as Marcus passed, stepping just slightly out of the way, eyes flicking up and then down again, as if unsure where to land. Marcus stopped at the engine intake and leaned in, listening, though there was nothing running yet. The habit remained. He straightened, adjusted the angle of the safety tag so it sat perfectly aligned, then checked it again, fingers brushing the edge twice instead of once. Across the floor, Raymond stood near the tool bench, arms folded now, gaze not fixed but drifting in Marcus's direction often enough to be felt. No one said anything. No one needed to. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose, almost inaudible, then tapped the final confirmation on his tablet. The sound was soft, a single touch against glass, but it seemed to settle something. His shoulders eased a fraction, his movements tightening back into rhythm, each step finding its place again as he turned toward the nose gear, the aircraft. Towering above him, unchanged, waiting. Marcus stopped at the nose gear panel, his tablet already in his hand, thumb poised over the final sign-off, when his eyes drifted back, just briefly, to the fuel line access seam he had closed minutes earlier. His thumb did not move, hovering a fraction longer than the rhythm he had just settled into. And in that small pause, the hangar seemed to lean in again, the distant hum thinning, a clipboard edge tapping once, and then stilling. He shifted his weight, glanced toward Raymond across the floor, then toward the open cabin door where Ethan's voice continued without interruption, and then back to the panel in front of him. Instead of tapping confirm, Marcus lowered the tablet to his side and turned, walking 3 steps off his assigned path, the motion quiet but unmistakable in a space that ran on straight lines. A nearby mechanic looked up fully this time, not hiding it. Marcus crouched at the access seam and ran his fingers along the edge, then pressed lightly at one corner. Listening, not for sound, but for resistance. The movement broke the pattern enough that Raymond's head snapped up, his posture tightening as he started across the concrete, boots striking sharper now. "What are you doing?" Raymond said, not loud, but cutting through the softened air. Marcus did not answer immediately, his hand still at the seam for a second longer before he withdrew it and stood. "Just checking a variance," he said, voice level, but arriving a beat late. Raymond closed the distance, stopping just inside Marcus's space, not touching, but near enough to shift the air. His gaze dropped to the closed panel, then back up, a thin pause stretching before he spoke again, slower this time, each word placed with intent. "We are past checks," he said, eyes flicking once toward the jet, then back to Marcus. "You sign it off." Across the hangar, Ethan's voice cut briefly as he stepped into view near the cabin stairs, his attention landing on the two of them for a fraction of a second longer than anything else had, his expression unchanged but his head tilting just enough to register the deviation. Marcus held the tablet at his side, fingers tightening once around its edge, then easing. His shoulders lifted a fraction and settled. He nodded, small, contained, and stepped back into line, bringing the tablet up again, but his thumb did not tap immediately. The space held, heavier now, as if waiting for the sound. Marcus's thumb hovered over the confirm icon, the faint glow of the tablet reflecting against the underside of his hand, when Ethan's voice cut clean through the hangar air, no longer filtered by distance or a phone line. "We are boarding now," he said, each word landing flat and certain, his gaze fixed directly on Marcus this time, no longer passing through him, but stopping, holding. The shift was small, but it pulled the entire space tighter. Conversations that had barely resumed thinned again into nothing. Even the distant hum of a compressor seemed to drop a notch, as if someone had turned it down without touching it. Ethan stepped closer, not fast, not aggressive, but with the kind of pace that assumed everything else would move around him. "Is it ready?" he asked, not loud, not raised, but without room for delay. The question did not hang. It pressed. Marcus did not answer immediately. His thumb lowered slightly, then paused again just before contact. The screen waited. Behind Ethan, Lena stood near the base of the stairs, one hand resting lightly on the rail, her posture still but not relaxed, her eyes moving between Marcus and the panel he had just left. Raymond remained just off to Marcus's right, close enough that his presence could be felt without looking, his silence now deliberate, stretched, expectant. The distance between all of them narrowed without anyone stepping closer. Marcus shifted his weight subtly, the sole of his boot turning a few degrees against the concrete. His gaze dropped, not to the tablet, but to the seam of the fuel panel again, the same place his fingers had pressed moments earlier. Nothing had changed. The surface looked the same. Flat. Closed. Within range. His jaw set for a fraction of a second, then eased. "Fuel is within operating range," he said, the same words as before, but slower now, each one placed carefully. Ethan's eyes did not leave him. There was a small pause, just long enough to be noticed, before Ethan spoke again. "That was not my question." The tone remained even, but the spacing between the words tightened, as if the sentence had been compressed. A ground tech near the tool cart shifted his stance again, this time not bothering to hide the glance, then quickly looked away when no one else moved. Marcus felt it, the attention settling, not loud, not obvious, but concentrated. The tablet remained in his hand, the confirm icon still untouched. His thumb lifted slightly, then lowered again, a controlled motion that did not complete. Raymond exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound, but sharp enough in the stillness to register. "We do not hold departures for hypotheticals," he said. Eyes still forward, not directly at Marcus, but aligned with him, as if speaking through him to the aircraft itself. Marcus nodded once, small, contained, but did not move his thumb. The delay stretched another second. Ethan took a step closer, closing the last few feet, stopping just inside Marcus's space without crossing into contact. "Sign it," he said, softer now, but more precise, the kind of softness that narrowed rather than eased. Lena shifted her grip on the rail, her fingers tightening slightly before relaxing again. No one else moved. The hangar door behind them hummed another inch open, the line of light across the floor creeping forward, cutting closer to Marcus's boots. He could feel the edge of it at his heel, a faint warmth against the concrete. Marcus inhaled slowly, the breath barely visible in his chest, then let it out through his nose. His eyes flicked once more to the panel, then back to the tablet. The choice sat there, simple in form, heavy in consequence. If he signed, the jet would push, the moment would close, and whatever he had felt in that scene would remain just that, a feeling, unspoken, unverified. If he did not, the delay would be immediate, visible, recorded in the rhythm of the hangar itself, a disruption with a name attached to it. His thumb pressed down halfway, stopping just short of the screen. The muscles in his hand tightened, then steadied. A second passed, then another. Ethan did not look away. Raymond did not speak again. Lena's gaze did not shift. The entire space seemed to hold its breath in that narrow slice of time. Marcus's thumb lowered the rest of the way and tapped the screen. The confirmation tone was soft, almost too soft for the size of the aircraft behind him, but it carried. A few feet away, the younger mechanic let out a breath he had not realized he was holding, then quickly bent over his clipboard again. Ethan gave a single nod, already turning away before the motion finished, his attention moving forward, past the moment, past Marcus, as if it had never required anything more than a pause. "Good," he said, already stepping toward the stairs. Lena followed after a beat, her hand sliding along the rail as she ascended, her eyes flicking back, once toward Marcus before disappearing into the cabin. Raymond remained for a moment longer, his gaze settling briefly on the now-closed panel, then on Marcus, not questioning, not approving, just marking the end of it. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head and turned away. The space loosened, but not completely. The hum of the hangar returned in pieces, sounds filling in the gaps left behind. Marcus lowered the tablet slowly, his hand steady now, the rhythm of his movements restored on the surface. He slid the device back into its holder, then reached out, and pressed once more against the edge of the fuel panel, the same corner as before, his fingers lingering there for a fraction longer than necessary before pulling away. The metal was cool, unchanged. He stepped back, giving the aircraft the space it needed to move, his boots crossing the line of light that had finally reached him, the brightness cutting across his coveralls as the engines began to whine to life somewhere deep within the frame of the jet, a sound that built gradually, steadily, filling the hangar as if nothing at all had been left unresolved. The engine whine deepened, not loud yet, but steady enough to settle into the bones of the hangar, a low vibration that seemed to smooth over the sharp edges of everything that had just happened without erasing them. Marcus stepped back another foot, then stopped, adjusting his stance as if recalibrating his balance against the sound. The jet remained still for now, held in place by chocks and routine, but the intention to move had already filled the space. Around him, the crew resumed motion in fragments. A tool was lifted, set down, lifted again. A clipboard page turned slowly, the paper catching light before flattening. No one spoke louder than necessary. Marcus wiped his hands again, though they were already clean, the rag folding over itself with a soft drag. He tucked it back into his belt, then immediately adjusted it, aligning the edge so it sat flush. His eyes drifted once toward the panel, then away, then back again, the glance shorter this time, more controlled. He shifted his weight from his left foot to his right, then settled both evenly, shoulders squared, chin level, as if anchoring himself to a point no one else could see. The sunlight line had moved farther now, reaching past where he had stood earlier, cutting under the wing and stretching toward the nose gear. Dust moved through it in slow, almost deliberate currents. Ethan's figure appeared briefly at the top of the stairs before disappearing into the cabin, his presence reduced now to a shadow passing across the doorway and the faint continuation of his voice inside, still even, still uninterrupted. Lena paused at the threshold a moment longer than before, one hand resting on the frame, her gaze dropping once toward the tarmac, then lifting back inside. She did not look at Marcus again. The door remained open. Raymond walked past Marcus without stopping, but his pace slowed just enough to register, his eyes flicking once toward the panel and then forward again, as if confirming something he had already decided not to question. Marcus inhaled, slow and quiet, then let the breath out through his nose, his shoulders rising a fraction and lowering again. His fingers brushed lightly against the side of his coveralls, a small, grounding motion, before he reached for the wheel chock near the nose gear. He did not remove it yet. He just touched it, nudged it half an inch, then set it back exactly where it had been, the rubber settling with a soft thud against the concrete. The engines continued to build, the pitch climbing by degrees, each layer stacking onto the last. Somewhere behind him, a cart rolled a few feet and stopped, its wheels ticking once as they cooled. No one called out. No one rushed. The delay was gone, but something else remained, stretched thin across the space like a wire that had not snapped yet. Marcus stepped back again, giving the aircraft its path, his eyes now forward, no longer returning to the panel, though the memory of it seemed to sit just behind his focus. He lifted his hand to his headset, adjusted it slightly, then let it rest, not speaking into it. The radio crackled once, then went quiet. The hangar door opened another inch, the outside light widening, the boundary between inside and outside softening but not disappearing. For a moment, everything held in a kind of suspended alignment, movement without urgency, sound without interruption, attention without direction. If something was about to shift, it had not done so yet, but it felt closer now, just beyond the edge of what could be seen or measured, waiting in the space between one action and the next. The engine pitch sharpened another notch, the vibration now steady enough to blur the thin line of dust beneath the wing, when a sharp crackle cut through Marcus's headset, louder than before, not routine this time, and then a second voice layered over it, tighter, compressed, ground, confirmed fuel pressure reading on external feed. Lena's voice, no longer casual, no longer spaced out between tasks. Marcus's head turned immediately, not toward the aircraft, but toward the panel he had touched earlier, his eyes locking on the exact seam where his fingers had pressed. Across the hangar, Raymond stopped mid-step, one foot still angled forward, his attention snapping back toward the jet, not Marcus this time. The radio crackled again, sharper. "We are seeing fluctuation. Repeat, fluctuation." And this time the words did not fade into the background. They pulled the entire space into alignment. Marcus moved without hesitation now, closing the distance to the panel in 3 quick steps, his hand already reaching for the latch. No one told him to. The latch snapped open with a clean, unmistakable click, and the panel swung outward. He pressed his fingers against the coupling, and this time the give was there, slight but real, a movement that should not exist. Pressure drop at the auxiliary line. Marcus said into his headset, his voice steady, cutting clean through the static. Inside the cockpit, Lena's hand moved across the controls, her posture tightening. "Confirm source," she said, already adjusting her position. Marcus did not answer with words. He tightened the coupling with a controlled turn, then another, the resistance changing under his grip until it locked into place. The vibration through the line shifted, subtle but immediate. On the radio, a pause, then Lena again, pressure stabilizing. The words landed differently. Not a guess, not a question, a confirmation. Across the floor, Raymond's posture changed, his shoulders dropping a fraction as he stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the open panel now, not avoiding it anymore. The younger mechanic near the cart stepped forward without realizing it, his clipboard hanging loosely at his side. Inside the aircraft, Ethan's voice cut off mid-sentence, a silence replacing it that had not existed before. A second later, he appeared at the top of the stairs again, but this time he did not descend immediately. He stood there, one hand resting on the rail, his body angled forward slightly, watching. Not past Marcus. At him. The engine pitch held steady now, no longer climbing, no longer shifting unpredictably. The change was small, but it settled the entire space. Lena's voice came through one more time, measured now. "Ground. We are holding until further verification." It was not a suggestion. It was a decision, and it had already been made. Raymond stopped beside Marcus, close enough to see the tightened coupling, his eyes tracing the line, then lifting briefly to Marcus before returning to the panel. He did not speak. He did not need to. The open panel, the adjusted line, the stabilized reading, all of it sat there in plain view, mechanical, verifiable, undeniable. Marcus stepped back half a pace, giving space again, his hands lowering to his sides, his posture unchanged, his breathing even. He did not look toward Ethan. He did not wait for a response. The aircraft remained still, engines running, but the movement had stopped before it ever began. And this time, it was not a delay. It was a correction. The panel remained open, the coupling now seated firmly in place, and the change carried outward in small, observable ways that did not need explanation. Raymond did not step back immediately this time. He stayed where he was, one hand lifting slightly as if to reach for the line, then stopping midair before lowering again without touching it. His weight shifted, heel to toe, then settled. "Run it again," he said. But the words came out slower than before, less like a command and more like a confirmation of what was already happening. Marcus did not respond verbally. He had already moved, fingers steady as he checked the line once more, not searching now, just verifying. The radio crackled with a cleaner signal. "Ground. Readings are holding," Lena said, her tone measured, no longer compressed. Inside the cockpit, her hand hovered over the throttle for a fraction of a second longer than standard procedure before she adjusted it, a controlled, incremental change instead of the smooth push from earlier. The engine tone followed, rising slightly, then holding, stable. At the base of the stairs, Ethan did not move for a moment. His hand remained on the rail, but his grip loosened, fingers opening and closing once before settling again. He looked down toward the open panel, not scanning, not dismissing, but fixed. When he finally stepped down, it was one step at a time, each foot placed carefully, as if recalibrating his pace to match something outside his control. He stopped a few feet from Marcus, closer than before, but without the same forward pressure. His gaze moved from the panel to Marcus's hands, then back to the line. "That should have been caught earlier," he said, the sentence even, but lacking the edge it carried before. No one answered him. The words did not land as instruction. They hung briefly, then fell away. Behind him, Lena stepped down onto the tarmac, her headset still on, one hand resting at her side, while the other held the rail a second longer than necessary before letting go. She looked at Marcus directly this time, not in passing, but with a brief, steady acknowledgement before turning back toward the cockpit. The younger mechanic near the cart took 2 steps closer without being told, eyes fixed on the open panel, his clipboard now hanging forgotten at his side. He leaned in slightly, then stopped himself, straightening again as if recognizing the boundary he had crossed. The space had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way attention moved and stayed. Raymond finally stepped forward, crouching beside the panel. He did not take over. He angled his body just enough to see the coupling clearly, his hand resting on his knee instead of reaching in. "Torque looks good," he said after a beat, more to the air than to Marcus, then stood again, slower than his usual quick rise. Ethan glanced at him, then back at Marcus, the movement smaller, less certain. He exhaled once, a visible breath this time, and adjusted the cuff of his jacket, smoothing it down as if returning to a familiar motion. "We are holding." Lena's voice came through again, more firmly now, and the statement seemed to settle the last of the forward momentum. No one moved to remove the chocks. No one reached for the next step. The aircraft idled, contained. Marcus closed the panel with a controlled motion, the latch clicking into place with a sound that carried cleanly across the now-quiet hangar. He stepped back half a pace, hands dropping to his sides, posture unchanged. He did not look up immediately. When he did, it was not toward Ethan, but toward the nose of the aircraft, as if confirming its position in space. Ethan remained where he was for another second, then nodded once, a small, contained gesture that did not travel far. "Finish the check," he said, but the words no longer pressed. They followed. Raymond did not contradict him. Instead, he turned slightly toward Marcus, leaving a gap where authority had been fixed moments earlier. Around them, the crew adjusted in quiet increments. The mechanic with the clipboard stepped back into line. A tool cart rolled forward and stopped at a measured distance. The hum of the hangar returned, but softer, more deliberate, as if it had learned something about where to settle. Marcus picked up his tablet again, his thumb moving this time without pause, not hesitating, not rushing, each input clean and precise. The line had held. The aircraft had held. And in the space between those facts, something had shifted enough that it could not be put back the way it was before. The panel clicked shut for the last time, and no one reached for it again. Marcus stepped aside as the checklist moved forward, his movements steady, unhurried, each step falling back into place without drawing attention. Raymond gave a short nod toward the ground crew, and the chocks were pulled in a smooth, practiced motion, the rubber scraping lightly across the concrete before being carried away. The engine tone rose again, cleaner now, holding its line without fluctuation. Lena climbed back into the cockpit, her hand brushing the frame as she passed, her pace measured but certain. At the base of the stairs, Ethan paused once more. He looked at the aircraft, then at Marcus, then down at the space between them. From his pocket, he took the keycard and, instead of tossing it, walked the remaining steps and set it flat on the edge of the service cart beside Marcus, aligning it with the metal lip before letting his hand fall away. He did not wait for acknowledgement. He turned and ascended the stairs, one hand resting briefly on the rail before disappearing into the cabin. No one spoke. The hangar resumed its rhythm in full now, tools lifting, carts rolling, voices returning at their usual volume. A mechanic passed behind Marcus without slowing. Another called out a measurement across the bay. The line of sunlight had moved past the nose gear entirely, leaving the floor evenly lit. Marcus picked up the keycard, turned it once between his fingers, and slid it into his pocket without looking up. The jet began to taxi, slow at first, then steady, its path clear. If this moment stayed with you, share what you felt, follow for more, and thank you for being